the Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Like, share, and subscribe to keep the conversations happening. Your support makes it all possible. Segal is a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness, and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body, translated into 26 languages and sold over 1 million copies worldwide. Visit innasegal.com. Honestly, I've never had this kind of conversation before, so I'm looking forward to what you have to say. And my first question, what set you up on this path of becoming a healer?
Well, for me, it was definitely not, I guess, what would I say? I had no idea. I didn't even know that profession existed when I was younger. So I was in pain. I was in a lot of pain. I had back pain. I had digestive issues. I had anxiety. I had psoriasis that started when I was really young, which was around 10 years old, which my dad has it, his sister is covered in it, and my grandfather had it. So it's not a very pleasant skin condition to have, especially when it's hot. And so I was going, I grew up with medicine, going to doctors and really believing that they had all the answers. That's how my mom thought and believed. And I just wasn't getting the help that I needed. And, then I started going to chiropractors and physiotherapists and healers and anyone you can imagine. But I was really going to get this healing with the idea that they were going to fix me and that I didn't have to do anything because I didn't know anything. And my body was foreign to me, something that I had no connection with really, besides that I, lived in it. And after quite a while, I ended up having very debilitating back pain to a point where it was, it was low back, it was sciatic nerve, where I could hardly walk, and it was painful to stand, sit, lie down, literally anything, and it was very inflamed. And I'd been seeing a particular chiropractor for about a year, 3 times a week, and this particular day, which was life-changing for me, I went again, called up his office, went to his office, told the secretary how bad I was. So he came out of his office and he just looked at me, and he was quite a very relaxed but also wise man. And he just said to me, your body's stuck. And I said, I know that part. What are you going to do to help me? And he said, he was silent for a moment, and then he said, nothing. And I said, what do you mean nothing? And he said, well, I've been seeing you for a year essentially, and your body wants to be stuck. So there's nothing I can do. You want to be stuck, go home. On the way home, I might have been extremely, extremely angry about this, but as people can imagine, but I also couldn't I couldn't let go of the thought that maybe there was something going on that I was participating in greatly, and that my body really had this language, and maybe I could do something about it, because I had really, really exhausted seeing everybody that I could see. And it was, sometimes it was 5 days a week. There was a lot. And I would get better. I'm not going to say that I never got better, but, and so I'd have time where I felt better. And so, I kept going back, but nothing lasted. Nothing was lasting. And often after I'd get better and I'd have a little bit of time of being better, somehow something would trigger, which I wasn't sure or understood. And I would literally go into enormous, crazy amount of pain. And so this particular time I thought, I'm going to go home and I'm going to heal myself. I really, really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to wing it. I don't know. I'm going to try. And so I felt like my thinking, my feeling, and like every part of me, my will was aligned with, I'm going to heal myself. And so I went home. I really started with something very simple. I placed my hands on my back and I started breathing into my back, realizing that so often I just literally held my breath, or my breathing was so shallow because I was terrified of feeling more pain that I was already in. And one of the things that happened as I was breathing was that the pain expanded, but it felt like my body did with it. It was hard to kind of really, really describe. And so I kept going, and I started to count backwards from 30 because my mind was coming in with skepticism and negativity. And then in between this counting, in between these thoughts, I had this inspiration, which was basically, what if there is something higher and something divine that can help me? And I don't know to what degree I believe in it or don't believe in it, but why not ask? Which I did. And I had my eyes closed and I felt these waves of warm energy moving through my body, and as if this gold light was kind of shining onto me. And I thought to myself, okay, something's happening, I don't know what. And then this weirdest, most strangest thought that I've never had in my life occurred to me. And the thought was, I wonder what my back actually looks like, expecting nothing to happen. And it literally felt within a moment like this light switch was turned on, and I could see my back. And I could see it as if I had this X-ray vision, and it was very, very inflamed and stuck and twisted. And I started asking questions, why do I have this? And all of a sudden, these images / memory, I'm going to say some of them are memories, that were showing up of, I moved to Australia, so I live in Australia from Eastern Europe without knowing one word of English, and I was really bullied for the fact that I didn't know how to speak this language, and I was from the wrong place, wrong part of the world. And I really felt the level of tension I carried from when I was 10 and I went to school here, and and I cried and I felt through it, and something started to move in my body, and then the image started to change, and my parents came with nothing. Like, they had zero money when we got to Australia, and it was a struggle for them. They grew up in a country with very, little ability to create an income, and then they come to this free country, and it was still a big struggle with the culture and with the country, and I guess also in some ways my parents felt freer to be themselves, and they were less controlled internally, whereas I felt the complete opposite, that I was freer. In Eastern Europe, and also we lived in Italy for about 9 months, and I felt very, very free to express myself, whereas I felt I could not be myself in school. And so I felt like that was a huge contributor to my back pain. And then I also realized, and this was more of a knowing than a memory, that my grandparents had gone through the war and lost a lot of family members, and everybody in the family actually has digestive issues because my grandparents never spoke about this loss and trauma. And I could really acknowledge and feel that this was very connected to me, and I had my own really big loss not that long prior to that. And I realized that I was this sponge also, and that I just always tried to help people by taking on their energy. And this was as much as I could handle in that evening of insight, and I fell asleep exhausted and probably had the best sleep for years. And then I woke up, and whilst I wasn't fully healed, I felt like my back had unwound and my whole body had unwound, and that there was about 70% less pain in my actual body. Being the skeptical person that I was at the time, I went, well, something's happened, but it doesn't mean, that it's going to be lasting in any way or form. So I'm just going to keep connecting and asking questions and exploring until more pieces of the puzzle connect and I have a deeper transformation. And so for the next several weeks, that's probably the most that I did. I was also studying writing, so I wanted to become a writer. And I was, studying that. And within those few weeks, my psoriasis disappeared, which was huge because it was very unpleasant. And it never really came back. And my back pain, again, improved, to a point where I had no pain. And, there's been a few times where maybe I've been standing, for hours and hours in high heels or something, teaching, where I might have had some pain, but nothing like I've ever had in my life. And that was way, way late on. So I would say for majority of time, there has not been back pain, at all, besides, when anybody would have it, which was times where I was doing crazy things as well by traveling and teaching nonstop and just, days of standing. And again, it was very mild compared to what I had experienced before, and my anxiety went down and I just went, okay, something did happen here. I'm curious, I want to explore.
Tell me about tapping into your body's innate wisdom.
So I realized in my own healing journey that the body was incredibly, incredibly intelligent, and that each part of the body was distinctly connected to something that happened to us in a story that we needed to understand, some wisdom that we needed to work with. And that the more we could kind of connect with it and realize that, for instance, the left side of the body, which is, where your heart is very connected to your inner self, to how you experience yourself from within, to, your own unique creative self, to how you look after yourself, how you nurture yourself, how you listen to your own intuitive knowledge and instinct, and whether you explore that side or not, essentially. And it is also extremely connected to feminine aspects of vulnerability, of emotion, showing your emotion. It is also connected to the feminine line, which means the women in your life that were the most influential, and what happened and how they influenced you. And then the right side of the body is connected more to your desire, to our desire to achieve in the world, to do something, to be remembered, to leave a legacy, to be a doer, to make things happen, to look after our family, and this was very connected to our masculine essence. And also at the same time, our relationship with masculine people in our lives was reflected in certain parts and organs in our body, as well as to how we did work. So for instance, when I've met women who've been, kind of like workaholics, let's call them, and these women, eventually developed tumors in their breasts, for instance. If it was the right breast, very, very often it was all about constant work and constant structural type thinking and doing, and not really having that softness and exploration of, their inner self and their own needs, which I found really, really interesting. This was with many women that I saw, that I was trying to help. And interestingly, obviously, because I had lower back pain, I wanted to explore it. And one of the things that I found, or several things that I found in that area that was true to majority of the people that I met and worked with, was that, because a lot of people have back pain, was that there was always some kind of worry around finances and support, needing support. And very often, if there had been any kind of trauma in childhood or even abuse, then they would push it down, because we don't know how to deal with those types of things when you're younger, into their body, and it would show up in kind of lower or mid back. And so I started to see that there were so many links in terms of wisdom in the body, and that the body was essentially in giving us sensations and pain, was trying to say, hey, pay attention, and there's things that you need to transform or understand or change your perspective on.
Okay, so there's a secret language happening here. How do you learn that language, and where do you start?
It's a great question. You start by actually sensitizing the body, and it sounds more complicated than it is, actually. So what I encourage people to do is, most people get stuck in their heads, and they're kind of like, they're trying to figure everything out from their mind and from their thinking. But when you want to get into the body, we need to move the body. And the easiest way to start, unless obviously you're in a lot of pain, and even if you are, you might do a slightly different version of this, but the easiest way is just to start shaking one arm. So ideally standing and shaking one arm as vigorously as possible for about 30 to 40 seconds, and then stopping and sensing the flow of energy in one side of your body versus the other side, because this is how we start to wake the body up. We need it to move, we need it to flow, we need it to be more alive. We need the circulation and the lymphatic system to be moving. And so, or you can jump on a trampoline and do a similar thing, or, if you're in a lot of pain, you might just rub your hands together really vigorously, awakening different pathways in the body, or even, rubbing your ears can do that as well. Because they all have pressure point. Well, this is a pressure point kind of experience to wake something within yourself up. You can even kind of, connect to your head and pull your hair to bring more circulation. So we need to create circulation first inside the body. And I'm just trying to take away any excuses for people by saying there's many ways of doing this. Once we have done that and the body is a little bit more awake, this is where we can bring our hands to the part of our body starting from where we have pain or tension, and we can start doing, again, what I did in my own healing journey, which is breathing into that part of the body and sensing, how can we expand this? How can we actually, not necessarily expanding the pain, but expanding the feeling, because when you do, you realize that the feeling starts to move and the pain can move. So you actually go, what is the sensation inside of my body that I can really connect with, that can give me insight and wisdom? And once we can enter into this sensation, we can start asking other questions, which are, which is the secret of the body that becomes not so secret, which is like, what are the thought patterns that are connected to this part of the body? And for those people who are very logical, you can start with, what does this part of the body do? What is its function? And when you understand the function more about this part of the body, it opens up the next step in the understanding of, well, what kind of beliefs are stored there. So let's say if I'm working on my heart, which is an area for a lot of people that has become blocked from hurt, I might go, well, my heart obviously, keeps me alive, essentially, and helps with circulation and all sorts of things. But I know that this is where I experience feelings for other people. This is an area of intimacy. It's connected to relationships. Pretty much, there's not many people around the world who don't know that my heart is in my relationship. It's in my purpose. It's in what, I really want to do and believe in. And so here we go, why would I have a blocked or hurt heart? Well, because, maybe I believe I don't deserve to have healthy relationships. Maybe I've been rejected and I have all sorts of beliefs around myself now that are hurtful. And those beliefs are often connected to feelings and experiences that we've had. And so we start to see the story of this language within ourselves unfold, letting us know why we have the blockages or the pain or the challenges in that particular part of the body.
Okay. So in your work, what have you found to be the true cause of illness?
There's many aspects to it. There's many parts to it. So I feel like when we see the bigger picture and we see all the different aspects that we can put together, we might start looking at what happened in the formative years of the person's life. In other words, in the first 21 years of life, we're essentially starting from how we experience birth. We start to, I would say actually in the womb, if I'm honest, whatever the mother felt, we experience, because we don't have, up until we get a little bit older, we're a sponge. We don't have any way to protect ourselves. So we literally take everything on. And even with the best parenting, often, unless the parents know all the stages of development that a child goes through, there are bound to be times that have been missed, and there's bound to be times where certain parts of our development potentially could have got stuck, or we could have been deeply influenced. So again, if I can give an example, for instance, if let's say a child is born into a family where there's a lot of secrets that are being kept, and because of that, people they're not honest, they don't want to see what's in front of them, and they're always trying to be happy and nice, but not real, not honest about what's going on. The child's going to feel that. And they're also going to potentially notice that there's a likelihood, I'm not saying it's always like this, but let's say in this scenario, both of the parents also wear glasses because they're trying to see something different and present something different, because the eyes are about, obviously, what do we see and, what don't we want to see? So in my experience, most people lose their vision because there's a lot more they don't want to see than what they do want to see. And so, this is what's happening, and the parents are being nice, but behind, closed doors, there's a lot going on that the child picks up on, even though it's never spoken about. And the child wants to help. And the child feels and senses that there's things that are dangerous to see, and they're dangerous to see to the family because maybe it will break the family up. And for the child, the biggest thing that's important is safety and survival. And so then the child, again, subconsciously, none of this is not like we go, yes, I would love to not see. But the child subconsciously will then copy what they see with their family and go, okay, I'm not going to see as well. Because they don't see, I'm not going to see what's happening. And so much of what I found to be true, I'm going to say, is things that we say, I don't remember, I don't know, my childhood was fine, but it's like, it's fine, but why do you potentially have issues that are very connected to childhood and childhood development? And these are not just physical. That could be depression, that could be anxiety, that could be mental illness, that could be struggles, that could be fear, that could be around the world I've met, and I've traveled a lot and taught a lot around the world. I've met very few people who don't carry the belief somehow in some way that they're not good enough, or that they're not enough. And I always say, well, actually that particular belief is universal, which means in some way that it becomes archetypal. And when we start to see things from that type of a perspective, and we see it's not that I am not good enough, it's that there is a part of me that believed that when I was growing up. But not all of me is not good enough. Once you can separate that, then you can really start to change that and everything else in your life and how you live your life.
As a hypnotherapist, I validate everything you're saying completely. And I'm glad that you said that things happen up to 21 as well, because the conventional narrative kind of implies that you don't have any other learning throughout your life after age 7, which is something that I've found to be infactual. Like, people always have challenges throughout their whole lives. And then subconscious mind is learning something from that. And a lot of the time, yes, it is, I'm not good enough somehow, or I'm not safe somehow, or something like that. Or a lot of people just don't feel loved and supported somehow. But we live our entire lives slaves to these beliefs. And it's just incredible how something so small at the end of the day actually has this big of an impact on us. And it just guides the trajectory of our entire life, and we will never know in some cases what it is that's causing challenges. But I have to ask you then, go ahead.
If I can just add one other thing. Mm-hmm. So the first 21 years from my experience is the setup for the rest of your life. And then you have 7-year time periods where you are revisiting things that you have not healed or transformed, or you couldn't because you just had no idea how to. And when I say, again, like, as you get older, you could be revisiting 7-year periods when you were in your 30s and when you were in your teenage years or younger. And I think that's, again, really important for people to be aware of, because I just want to give a really quick example. Years and years ago, I was teaching in France, and there was I was actually trying to give an example of how I do it, right? And so we were filming this, and I had a lady who had done some of my workshops, but I didn't know a lot about her, and she was going to be my example as we were going to film. And it took there were lots of things that were happening, so we didn't actually start filming until it was around 9 p.m. at night. And the first thing that I did is I started to kind of scan her body and tune in, and I started with her with the nervous system. I just wanted to see the state of her nervous system. And immediately I saw that she was struggling with conflict and abuse. And when I even acknowledged that to myself, I saw an image of her and her partner in conflict, shouting and fighting. And I started, describing this and saying to her, and she said, no, that's not true. And I said, right, okay, are you sure that, because that's what your body's showing? She said, no, none of this is true. It's not happening. Let's stop filming. And her best friend was there, and he started speaking to her in French, and he said, I don't understand what you're doing. Why are you lying, Tina? This has happened recently. You've just had issues. And she said, I have dealt with it, so Ina cannot see that. And it's the reason I'm giving that as an example, obviously, is because people think that because they did one exercise around, they went to see somebody and they told them, okay, now this is released and this is over, as opposed to the body doesn't lie in that way. And whatever is there, it's like it will not let go until you truly change, right? Not just because you think you have.
Thank you so much for saying that, because there are going to be so many people that listen to this that aren't practitioners in anything, and they don't understand the ins and outs of these things. But I feel deeply as though the more you can understand how these things work and how you lie to yourself, the easier it is for you to actually get into that mindset where you're willing to question what's going on inside of you, because it's imperative. Like, you owe it to yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So, why does chronic illness or chronic pain then often start in one area and then spread or show up somewhere else?
I find that question, like, to be so interesting in a sense that most people don't know this. They don't realize this. And they're always trying to work on something that is really obvious. And so recently I was doing some sessions with people, and it was a group sessions, and I was answering questions and tuning into some of the people and who had questions. And what I was asking them, and so there was a lady, and she said, can you help me with my wrist, because I'm having huge issues with my wrist, and I'm trying to focus on my wrist and things are not improving. And when I connected to her, the first thing I actually saw was her neck and shoulders, but in particular her neck. And I said to her, well, that's really interesting, because as long as you focus on your wrist, you're actually not going to get any healing, because it did not start in your wrist. It started in your neck. And she said to me, oh my God, yes, I've just been to a therapist who told me the same thing. And I said to her, it also started, with somebody who is male, because it was on the right side, who you had an issue with, but you've just pushed it away. Rather than communicating, talking through it, you've kind of ignored it. And the wrist is the end result of you not being able to essentially continue. But the real issue is in the neck, and actually the neck is showing you that there is a relationship that needs to be worked on and looked at. Does this ring true? And she kind of went a little bit red, and she went, yes, absolutely, this is true. And what it shows me, I've known this for many, many years, obviously, because I teach it, is that where it first shows up, the body is so, it's, how can I put it, resilient. I'm going to say it's so resilient. It gives you little messages at the beginning, and kind of gives you little kind of knocks on the door. And we ignore that because we're just so busy running through our lives, right? And nobody can heal unless they slow down, essentially. So they're running through their lives, trying to chase something and trying to get everything done without realizing how much resistance they also have and how much their body is actually speaking to them. And so the body goes, okay, all right, I'm going to give you as much time, I believe, as is possible for you to figure this out through very gentle knocks where it's actually quite easy to transform things. But if you don't listen, and essentially what happens is that when something starts, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Jehan, when something starts, it's like, it is easier to transform, and we often don't pay attention. But then there's more and more and more experiences that occur that are similar. It's not that it's just one experience. It's like, it's not one seed. It's many, many layers. And these experiences lead to the next part of the body, usually where you have the next weakest link from where it started, but where it becomes much more physically noticeable. So maybe you didn't notice it as much in one area than the other. So if I come back to, like my own low back pain and psoriasis and all of this, and somebody asks me a question, okay, well, when do you think it started? And I can tell you that both for me, from my own perspective and ancestry, it all started in the throat and not communicating, not knowing how to express and share and assimilate experiences and transform things through that communication, because my grandparents were terrified that even if they talked about anything that happened to them, they would end up in jail or somewhere, like really, they were scared of saying a word. They whispered to each other and never talked about it to anybody else. And so when you live under that type of threat, maybe it doesn't show up in the throat, but it certainly showed up in every member of the family and their digestive system, and in many cases, it actually didn't show up in the throat, but it showed up in the teeth. Everybody in the family has bad teeth because, we need to communicate. We need teeth, to chew things over, because I sat with it a lot. Even my brother, who was the youngest out of the whole family, he, obviously we have children and so on, but over that generation, and only spent 2 years of his life in Eastern Europe, has struggled with his teeth his whole life. So it's like, and it was the most removed from my grandparents and understanding things. So when we realize, things start in a particular area and then eventually settle somewhere where there is a weakness, but where the message is clearer and you can't ignore it.
It's funny that you said that, because years ago I had an issue with a tooth. And when I figured out what it was the exact same thing. I wasn't expressing myself. I felt unheard in a lot of ways. And I just kind of learned not to say things to people because I felt like if I did, they wouldn't receive it, or they would ignore me, or whatever the case is. And I'm not kidding when I say that as soon as I dealt with it, a few weeks later, the tooth in itself, like the end of it broke off, but all of the pain that was going on with it completely stopped. The root of the tooth healed over and it was fine. And the dentist actually was kind of like, I don't really know what happened here, but it shouldn't be healed. And so it just became like an anomalous event that nobody had any explanation for, but I knew what the explanation was, So
yeah.
What can you tell me about the most common challenges besides I'm not good enough somehow that your clients have?
Well, it's hard to say common in a sense, because in some ways everyone's very unique to themselves, but I often feel like the most common challenge is actually ignoring any messages from their own body, and that can, and just pushing on. And, these types of things, a lot of people have fatigue. Fatigue is one of those huge, chronic fatigue that can actually lead to fibromyalgia. And I've noticed that this has become a huge issue because people essentially, firstly, they don't understand that they have subtle bodies. And one of those subtle bodies, let's call it, in my understanding, the etheric body, holds your vitality and energy. It's like the body of chi. And you're born with a particular amount of energy. And what people think is that they have unlimited amount of energy, and if they burn themselves out, then they can rest a little bit and regain the same amount of energy. Well, that's a lot of people found out that's not the case. And people forget that in order to heal anything, you also need energy. They don't actually realize or know that. And so one of the big things that I talk about and teach people is, understanding this and understanding how to work with it, and understanding that pushing and forcing, and I have to remind myself of this too, because, we're all in the same boat, because I always want to do more too. And I have to ask my body constantly, is it, well, firstly, I ask, do I really, really need to get this done today? Because I don't have an issue with procrastination. I've worked through that. That is an issue for a lot of people. I have an issue with more overdoing things. And so I ask myself that question, and I go, do I really, if I had to listen to my body right now, and my mind wants to get it done, because, if I get it done, then maybe I have more space and more time in the next few days or weeks. But with my body, I ask pretty much daily, can you do more, or is this enough, for you to be healthy? And when I hear it's enough, as much as my mind might go, oh, I really want to finish this, I just go, okay, I'm going to go and lie down. I'm going to go and meditate. I'm going to go and connect. I'm going to go and do something to re-nourish and re-strengthen myself. And essentially what I see is this lack of understanding that your body is your friend, not your enemy. And it's not that things happen to you because you're so unlucky, but they happen to you because, and they also don't happen to you because you need to blame yourself in some way, but they happen because that's what happens in life. And you either allow things to control you, or you become the one who does it. You become the one who's aware of it. So I've had a lot of clients who've had migraines and headaches. And it's really interesting, again, seeing, especially migraines, that it doesn't just come from negative thinking from the head. It absolutely does come from intense amount of overwhelm. And that often actually starts in the root chakra, if we were to talk about energy centers and chakras, and anger that is being suppressed, then just kind of negative thinking. I've had a lot of people with autoimmune diseases and nervous system disorders that I'm seeing constantly showing up, and heart issues. And so when we're looking again at nervous system disorders, we're looking at a system that is a communication system. And whenever you have shock or trauma that you ignore and push away, and that could be a relationship, because so much of it are about relationships. Your health and your relationships definitely reflect your health. So I think we froze, so I thought I'll just wait.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully
I think it's just the internet. So I'll just finish my little rant.
If you can pick it up from the, I guess, middle of what you were saying, just in case.
Yeah. So for instance, if you have a headache and especially migraines, most people don't realize that there's a lot of suppressed anger, and this suppressed anger is connected to trauma that has not been addressed. And I've seen this so many times with my clients, where there's literally been some kind of violence or a lot of abuse that is being pushed down and suppressed with those who continue to have these migraines and headaches. And then we have so many people with nervous system disorders. And again, how do you end up with that? You usually, I'm not gonna lie, I think food has something to do with it. So if you eat really toxic food, it will affect your nervous system without a doubt. And you drink Coca-Cola and things like that all the time. But if we're looking at experiences when you have been shut down, maybe even early as a child, and then you're shut down at work, and then you're shut down in a relationship, or you have some kind of a loss, then eventually there is such a disorder. And not actually getting the messages to the whole body, which is what the nervous system is meant to do. And also being constantly on guard. And then, for instance, when we connect to the heart or and heart disease, again, we're looking at relationships and what people and the difficulty people have in really expressing their feelings and expressing and learning how to understand each other and communicate in relationships, which also connects to thyroid issues that most people have as they get older, which affects their hormones and their, digestive system and everything, and how they function, and the weight. All of these things are affected by the fact that we don't really often know how to communicate with people who are close to us. And then we have autoimmune disease that is rampant. And again, I'm going to say there's definitely a fact of eating really sugary, unhealthy, toxic food that's connected to it, but it's not the whole issue. The issue is, with autoimmune disease, is that, again, the immune system is meant to fight against, and protect you against invading, so to speak, invaders, let's call it, invading energy, invading force, whatever you want to call it, where the immune system is meant to come in and go, oh, somebody's coughed or sneezed, let's not get this. Let's not get this, whatever, again, a virus or infection. Now, why does it turn against itself? Right? Why do we have autoimmune disease? Because somehow from early on, we have been taught to fight against ourselves internally, and this is the same with inflammation, like arthritis. So many people have arthritis, inflammation inside the body. And yes, there's food involved in that, but it's also an internal conflict, and what's really going on internally for you. What is the fight that you're ignoring that you need to be looking at? And, so I've been helping people with all sorts of things like this to start to understand and work with.
Awesome. So in closing, what is one key piece of insight that you wish you had when you started?
So many. I wish that I had a deeper understanding, for me personally, of how our subtle bodies worked. This is one big one that took me a long time to understand, that, for instance, our emotional body, and it is a kind of a subtle body, is actually a lot more fragile than we think it is. And when we either numb and suppress emotions and want to get rid of them, or we want to essentially not feel what we're feeling, I realized that the more people pushed away, suppressed, the more likely they were to have autoimmune diseases, the more likely, or nervous system diseases, and that by numbing that and freezing, they actually started to impact most of their body, including their digestive system, and that we actually need to become friends with our emotions. And when we do become friends with them and we work with them instead of against them, and we gain wisdom, you must gain wisdom from an emotion. And we don't want to get rid of them. We actually want to use them in ways that they are meant to be used. That anger tells us that maybe we need to protect ourselves, or have healthier boundaries with others, or that something's off and not right, or that we need to turn our anger into passion, and actually we're angry because we feel lost and hopeless around doing something in our lives, and it's an opportunity to learn and become really good at it, so that you can help people instead of turn the anger within, which also becomes depression. And so I really, I guess I wish I knew and understood how important that was, and the gentleness that we need to apply to those feelings, and not forcing them, not forcing them out, and not pushing them in, but actually being really, really gentle with the experience, and also recognizing that, being specific, that rather than calling everything anger or everything fear, that you specify, where in my body do I have anger, and where do I have fear, and what exactly is that fear about? And actually starting to realize that the fear that you have in your throat is not the same fear that you have in your digestive system or solar plexus, is not the same fear that you might have in your lower back. In the throat, the fear could be about talking and expressing yourself. In the digestive system, it could be actually partly ancestral fear that you're holding on to, and could be a fear of loss of something, or a fear of this not being good enough. And, when you put the fear in your lower back, it's the fear of lack and the fear of not being supported. And what I really wish that I knew at that time is how to identify and become much more specific. And that is the same that I want other people to start to learn and understand. The more specific you are, the faster and easier your healing occurs, without forcing or pushing anything. Essentially, it actually occurs in its own time, in its own way, in a beautiful way, because you're allowing and you're discovering and understanding it.
Fantastic. Anna, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Can you tell us where we can find you?
Yep. So the easiest way is to go to my website, inasegal.com. So INNASEGAL.com. And then if you want to go a little further and understand a little bit more about my work, just put inasegal.com/masterclass and get a journal and start to watch and understand how I go through all the kind of pieces of the puzzle, including several processes that you can participate in to start to experience things within yourself. And it's completely free.
Okay. Thank you very much for being on the Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious and the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
All the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast.